Sean O'Malley and Conor McGregor have quite a few similarities, but none are as fascinating as their ability to make UFC champions look pretty easy. Conor McGregor ran through Aldo in only 13 seconds. He then went up and made a punching bag out of Eddie Alvarez for 2.5 rounds. Sean O'Malley took what was considered by many to be the best bantamweight champion of all time, Aljamain Sterling, a nightmare matchup for him style-wise, and finished him 51 seconds into the second round without taking any damage. What's actually uncanny though is both Conor McGregor and Sean O'Malley used the same technique in all three of these fights to finish their opponents. The technique is referred to as the pull counter. The pull counter is a boxing originated technique that acts as a simultaneous defensive and offensive tool. It's a pull counter because the technique involves pulling back from an opponent's punch only to instantly re-engage and throw a counter punch. Sean O'Malley and Conor McGregor are so good at this technique, they make their opponents miss by quite literally mere millimeters. Floyd Mayweather commonly used this in his fights as well, but it never had quite the same devastating effect. See, the reason this technique wasn't as devastating as it was for Floyd in his career as it is for Sean O'Malley and Conor McGregor's career actually hasn't got to do with the mastery of this technique. It isn't how good Sean O'Malley or Conor McGregor or Floyd Mayweather even are at the pull counter. It's actually an entirely different factor that I'm just about to get into. I forget Sean O'Malley and Conor McGregor here making these guys miss by the smallest increment and just focus on how Eddie and Aljamain are throwing these punches in these frames. Can you see it? To the untrained eye, you might be confused wondering why we are looking at these guys throwing punches. So let's go over the basics of boxing technique for just a quick minute. See, boxing teaches the safest way to throw a punch to ensure that you aren't counterpunched. By 1, returning your hands back to your head after you punch, and 2, maintaining your balance and your feet under you during and after the punch is thrown. Meaning not throwing the punch so hard that if you miss, your body still travels forward. It's taught this way so that if you miss your punch, you aren't falling forward or worse, completely falling over, and you have some defense just in case they hit back. And that's basically the complete opposite of this. Both these guys aren't only leaving themselves very open for counters with their hands not returning to guard position, more importantly, their bodies are still carrying momentum forward. They're actually in the middle of falling forward. The level of commitment and follow through in these shots are crazy. They are essentially running into the counter shots from Conor McGregor and Sean O'Malley, amplifying the damage massively. It's just a whole other level of power and damage when your body weight and your opponent's body weight are colliding at the same time. And this is going to lead me to my next point in this video, which I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for. With the knowledge that this technique is used quite a lot by numerous fighters and doesn't lead to KO blows, except when the person being counterpunched throws an unsafe and overcommitted punch. Can you tell where I'm going with this? I'm just going to say it. These champions weren't great at boxing. Hey, listen. I know these guys must be great boxers compared to the general population to get where they are in the world. They're UFC champions. Of course they know boxing. Just, they're obviously lacking some levels compared to Sean O'Malley and Conor McGregor to be caught out like this. But there's a very specific reason they're getting caught out like this and made to look easy in these fights. And that's our segue for my next point. Khabib wants to make it a wrestling match, Israel Adesanya wants to make it a kickboxing match, and Conor McGregor and Sean O'Malley want to set up these boxing exchanges so they can show off their great counter-punching ability. But let me ask you this. Did we ever see Conor McGregor shoot a takedown on Khabib? And did we ever see Sean O'Malley shoot a takedown on Aljamain Sterling? Of course not, because we know that that would be pulling their opponents into the position where they are most comfortable. So why would they do that? Why would these guys do this? Their opponents knew that they were boxing heavy counter punches, so why would they be throwing powerful boxing punches at their opponents? It's literally the equivalent of shooting a takedown on Khabib and being confused when you get out wrestled. And this leads me to clarify the point here. Having a masterful boxing game in MMA with power in your hands can be really dangerous because punching is just so damn natural for people. Someone's in a fight, you just really want to punch them in the face. And these guys are the top of their game athletes. They know not to throw these strikes. Both Eddie Alvarez and Aljamain Sterling even clarified after the fights that they should not have been doing that. Should not have been boxing with their opponent. Should not have been throwing a big overcommitted shot like they did that led them to get knocked out. But it's just so natural for us. We see someone in a fight and we're just going to punch them. Like, it's easier for guys to make a mistake when you're fighting a boxing heavy opponent rather than a wrestling heavy opponent. And this is so obvious because no one talks about it. If Conor McGregor shot a takedown and got submitted by Khabib, we'd all call him an idiot. But when Aljamain Sterling knows he's fighting a counter-puncher, knows that Sean O'Malley is better at boxing than he is, and he throws a power punch, knowing power punches are exactly what counter-punchers love their opponents to throw so they can counter-punch them, we don't say the same thing. Just so we're clear, there's ways of fighting without engaging in any boxing exchanges. Khabib didn't throw a single power punch at all in the opening rounds, knowing McGregor was too dangerous on the counter-punching. He did mask one powerful punch with a takedown, which was brilliant, but still hiding a strike with a feinted takedown, that's not a boxing exchange that McGregor is trained to use his counter-punching skills in. He didn't even know the punch was coming. Khabib did use some boxing and counter-punches later on in their fight, however, he still did a good job of not overextending, and he waited till McGregor was gassed out in the later rounds to do this because he knew McGregor's hands were gone, out of breath. He didn't have the power in those later rounds to put out Khabib anyway. But if we want to see an example of a boxing heavy fighter still avoiding McGregor's counterpunching, Dustin Poirier did that very well. He didn't overcommit or overextend to any of his shots. He kept his feet and balance under him. So even when he was counterpunched, which he was in that fight, it wasn't as devastating and didn't end the fight instantly. And also, after all of his power punches, he either shot a takedown, moved his head off the center line, covered up, or went to a leg kick. He also leg kicked and grappled way more than he ever has, knowing the danger he was in on the feet. But this even shows that even a boxing heavy opponent can still use fight IQ to avoid McGregor's counter punches, or Sean O'Malley's for that matter. I just wanted to bring up those two as examples to show off game plans that don't involve throwing committed power punches. I know it's such a common move, but there are actually lots of other MMA techniques that you can use. You can take power punches almost entirely out of your arsenal, and if you do that, a counter puncher like O'Malley or McGregor are actually going to have a lot of problems with you. And it just makes sense. Why would you take your opponent to the one thing they have absolute mastery over? If you did that, it'd probably make the fight really easy for them. Until next time, this is Zaya's Fight Hype. I'm out.